I remember the countless nights when I would lay my head on my grandmother's lap, her wrinkled fingers running through my hair as she told me stories. Each word she spoke was a thread in the tapestry of my childhood, weaving warmth, comfort, and wisdom into my soul. Whenever I felt lost or overwhelmed, she had a way of bringing me back, of making me believe in the beauty of life again. One story in particular became my anchor. She told it to me whenever I was on the verge of giving up, whenever I doubted myself, whenever I cried over the weight of the world. I can still hear her gentle voice in my mind telling me softly, "Listen carefully, child. This is not just a story, it is life itself." And so the story began. Everyone has a story in life. A 24-year-old man sat on a train, his face pressed against the window like an eager child. His eyes sparkled with wonder as he pointed outside. "Dad, look! The trees are moving backward," he exclaimed, his voice filled with excitement. His father, sitting beside him, smiled warmly. A young couple seated nearby exchanged puzzled glances. The boys' enthusiasm seemed unusual, almost childish. They whispered to each other, shaking their heads. Moments later, the young man clapped his hands together. "Dad, the clouds, they're moving with us." The couple could no longer contain their curiosity. The woman leaned forward, her tone laced with concern. "So, have you considered taking your son to a doctor?" The father turned to her with a serene smile. There was no sadness in his eyes, only quiet understanding. "We have just returned from the hospital," he said. "My son was blind from birth. Today, he saw the world for the first time." The air in the train shifted. The couple sat back, speechless, their faces burning with shame. That night, as my grandmother told me this story, she gently cupped my face in her hands. "Never judge a person before you know their story, my child. Sometimes the truth will humble you. Shake off your problems one evening." My grandmother noticed I was troubled. My shoulders slumped, my heart heavy with disappointments. She gave me a knowing look and began another story. "There was once a farmer who had a beloved donkey," she said. "But one day the donkey fell into a deep pit." I frowned. "Did the farmer save it?" "He tried, but the pit was too deep. He didn't know what else to do." I sat up, eager to hear more. "So," she continued, "he made a painful decision. He decided to bury the donkey alive." My heart clenched. "That's terrible." "Yes," she nodded, "but listen carefully. As the farmer began shoveling dirt into the pit, the donkey felt the weight of the soil on its back. It was heavy, suffocating, but instead of giving up, it did something incredible." "What?" I whispered. "It shook off the dirt and stepped on it." I blinked, again and again. The farmer shoveled more dirt, and each time the donkey shook it off and stepped up. By noon, it had climbed out of the pit and was grazing freely in the green fields. My grandmother looked deep into my eyes. "Do you understand? Life will throw dirt at you. People will try to bury you in your struggles. But if you shake it off and step up, you will rise." The elephant rope. Some nights, my insecurities would overwhelm me. I would cry into my pillow, afraid to try, afraid to fail. And each time my grandmother would take my hand and tell me this. There was once a man who visited an elephant camp. He saw a huge, powerful elephant tied to a small rope. No chains, no cages, just a flimsy rope around its front leg. "Why doesn't the elephant break free?" I would ask. "Because," she said, "when it was a baby, that same rope was strong enough to hold it. It tried to break free back then, but it was too weak, and so it gave up now. Even though it's powerful enough to break the rope, it never tries because it still believes it can't." Tears pricked my eyes. Many of us live like that elephant, thinking we are still bound by past failures, she whispered. "But you, my child, must always try. Potatoes, eggs, and coffee beans on the hardest nights When I felt completely defeated, my grandmother would take me into the kitchen. She would place 3 pots of water on the stove and say, "Watch closely." As the water began to boil, she would drop potatoes into one pot, eggs into another, and coffee beans into the third. Minutes passed. She turned off the stove and placed the items in front of me. "Touch the potatoes," she instructed. I pressed my fingers against them. They were soft, weak. "Now break the egg." I cracked the shell, revealing the hardened interior. Finally, she handed me the cup of coffee. Its aroma filled the air, rich and inviting. "What does this mean?" I asked. She took my hands in hers. Each of these faced the same adversity, the boiling water. But they all reacted differently. The potato went in strong, but came out weak. The egg started fragile, but became hardened. And the coffee? She smiled. The coffee transformed the water itself. It created something entirely new. She cupped my face in her hands one last time. "So tell me, my child, when adversity comes, will you be a potato, an egg, or a coffee bean?" The power of her stories. Years later, long after my grandmother was gone, I found myself lost in the chaos of life. Struggles mounted, doubts crept in, and I felt small, powerless. But then, as if carried by the wind, her voice echoed in my heart. "Shake off the dirt and step up. Don't let a small rope hold you back. Transform the water." I closed my eyes, breathed deeply, and smiled. Because of her stories, I was never truly lost. Because of her stories, I always found my way back. And now I share them with you so that no matter what life throws at you, you will remember you have the power to rise.